we will. The reason I picked that sutra is it's the Buddha teach about how you confirm a knowledge, how can you verify a knowledge, and I think it's important for us in this period of time. There's a lot of information out there, and even though this sutra is more relevant to the Buddha talking about rebirth and karma, those are the issue that the people raise have doubt about. But I think once we read this and we can get understanding what the Buddha tried to teach, and we can apply that to other things like information, how we can justify whether it's true or not. So I think it's helpful. So anybody, have you read a sutra at all? Try read before. So usually the sutra will start out with a phrase like "I heard thus," "thus I have heard," and the I in that sutra refer to Ananda. Ananda is the last personal attendant of the Buddha. I think he's served him over like 20 years. So his remarkable ability Ananda have is, and Buddha praised about that, is he have ability to remember every single word the Buddha said, and he can recite it without missing one. And so he is after the Buddha passed away, after 3 months after, there's a first council took place, and he is the one that recite the sutra. So that's why in every sutra usually begin with "I heard thus," and if you read a sutra, most of them will kind of a formal report or summary what's going on in the meeting. It's kind of, it will tell you who's the host, who's a speaker, the audience, where it took place, where it happened, the time. So usually, and what happened going on. So it's kind of like the summary of a meeting. So this sutra is called Kamala, is because it's taken place in a village, and the people they are known as the Kamala people. So the place where the Kamala people reside is a lot of scholars, a lot of religious people pass by, and they stop by, they expound on their belief, and then they criticize the others. They say, my belief is right, the other is wrong, and then the other group come in and say the same thing. So as a result, the Kamala people confused. They don't know what is right. And in here, if you read through, it's pretty much the issue they're confusing about is the rebirth. Some reject the rebirth, some say the rebirth is right, the other one is not exist, and karma. I don't know, anybody know about karma here? No. So the concept of rebirth in Buddhism is, the Buddha say we not have not just one life, this life, but you have so many lives in the past, and basically once you pass away, when you die, you will rebirth to one of 6 realms, and the Buddha described the first realm, the lowest, the most suffering realm is hell. It's equivalent to hell. The second one is demon ghost. The third realm is animal. We is another realm, human realm. And then the next 2 levels is higher based on the marriage that they earn. We're talking about karma they create during their lifetime in the past and the present, which lead them to which realm they will end up. So the next 2 is more higher compared to human. Is Atula is more like anger god, and the last one is God, like the good one. So there's 6 realms, and the Buddha say we as the sentient being is cycle through that birth cycle, try cycle through the death and birth cycle, go through that 6 realm, and based on our karma, the karma will direct you where you go. And the karma concept is the word mean what you do, what your habit. Karma is like your habit, what you routinely do, and the concept say what you do is like cause and effect. It's like causation, cause and effect law, but it's a little bit deeper than that. The cause and effect is more reflect to what happened right now. Like if you apply one event happen and take an effect to another immediately, most of the science, like you apply a force to an object, the object may move, or you do something, there's a consequence, reaction right away. But karma is go more deeper. It's a first is the effect not necessarily have to be take place in this lifetime, but it can delay into next life if you believe in rebirth. That's why karma require rebirth concept. And the source of the karma is come from what you your mind, what you think, what your intention, volition, and your action, and your speech. That is 3 sources that generate karma. And the karma say if your mind, there's a correspondence to the cause. If you do a good deed, then there's a corresponding good result. If you do a bad deed, will be a corresponding bad result. It's just like you have a seed of orange. It will give you, if you nurture, plant it, it will give you an orange tree and give you the orange as a fruit. So it cannot give you the apple. So it cannot go different result. And like I mentioned, it can go past to different life. It can be happen right next life, or maybe the result will not happen until later. So that's the concept of karma. And the result, so usually in Buddhism they say, look at what you have right now, and that is the result of what you did in the past and in the present. Those dictate what your current state. And then in Buddhism say what you're doing right now will dictate where you go next. So it's implied what you do good depend on where you do a good or bad deed, it will direct to the next what rank that you will end up. So that is the concept karma and rebirth. And the people have doubt because first they cannot recall past life. As all of us, we barely remember what couple past event we had, not talking about the previous life. So people doubt, and I myself before a monk, I'm a scientific, I doubt too. I mean, I don't believe in rebirth before that. To me, I have to experience, witness, either you see it, you have some witness, direct experience, then I believe. Otherwise, it's just a hearsay. And the karma, I can kind of accept. At that time, I accept because the causation, you can see the effect every day. But to say it, well, because you don't believe rebirth, then you don't pretty much believe the karma can go to the next life. So I guess it's not just the people at that time, but like most of us here at these periods have the same doubt. So the Buddha tried to explain or address the issue so that so he pretty much what he say is it's obvious they will be down because they uncertain, and he lists all of the different sources that information or knowledge you can get. Is the first one is repeat hearing. So he said, do not go up on what has been acquired by repeated hearing. That means you hear repeatedly oral history, people tell you over time, nor up on tradition, like what you usually do a practice based on the custom, nor up on rumor. So you hear some people tell you, nor up on what is in scripture. So like even in scripture, in authority text, when you obtain information, that's another source. Nor up on surmise. Some bhikkhu, Buddhi bhikkhu, he translate, he say it's a logical reasoning. So before it's like what you hear and what you read, that's the information you get from. And then the other next source is through reasoning, what you're reasoning. So either through logical reasoning or maybe some action, inferral reasoning, maybe some of common sense that seems obvious to you, maybe the reason based on previous notion that you pondering is or bias. Basically, you reasoning based on certain bias, and nor up on another seeming ability. That means based on their expert. So some people have expert certain thing, they speak very well about certain topic. Nor up on consideration the monk is our teacher. So even your guru, this another source you can obtain from, and he say for that you have to maybe doubt. It's okay to doubt those information. So basically what he say is information come from reading, from what you hear, from even though from authority texture like scripture, from authority person, like even your teacher, and from reasoning, it's okay to doubt. Then he give you the criteria to either accept or reject or resolve that doubtness. Is when you yourself know, it means you direct knowledge, these things are bad, these things are blamable, these things are censored by the wise, undertaken and observed, these things lead to harm and ill, then you abandon. Otherwise is the opposite, then you accept and abide that practice. So based on that, for me, when I look those like how you consider is wholesome or good or bad, that's the first question, is how you consider this thing is good or bad, how you consider thing is blamable or not blamable, and who is considered a wise person. Because if the wise person censor or praise, then that's another way you can confirm. But the last one he say is actually direct knowledge. You have to experience this, and experience and undertaken and observe. That means you actually practice and have some direct knowledge or direct experience that confirm the consequence of your the things that you, if you try to practice, see whether it have any harm or benefit. And the next step, he go and elaborate more on what consider is wholesome. So he say the three source is greed, hate, and delusion. Is the three source that will basically is the one that lead you to if you, so what he says, if greed is can cause harm, so most of the time if you look back and re-examine most of the greed craving, whether it lead to harm or illness, or bring it to benefit, that's the question you have to consider. And most of the time the greed, if you overwhelm, if you dictate and do like based on that you do killing, or then he mentioned about 4 precepts. That's most, I guess most those you know in Buddhism. So the 5 precepts in Buddhism is no killing, no stealing, no lying, no adultery, and no intoxication. So but he only mentioned the first 4, is no killing. If the greed that lead to killing, lying, stealing, adultery, then it lead to harm. And so basically he refer back to morality, whether it go against morality, and if it does, then what you do, you abandon. So, and the same thing for hate and delusion. So if those hate and delusion lead you to harm, lead you to do violate the 4 precepts, then those you need to abandon. And then it's just a reverse. The next he talking about is the reverse, is when you have no longer have greed, craving, hate, delusion. Then those will lead you to benefit, well-being, because you don't go to violate the four precepts. And so that is then he next in the sutra he expound on the notion, the four noble, they call four exalted dwelling. That means loving compassion, loving kindness, compassionate, glad, and equanimity. So he's talking about those that disciple of the noble one. They practice no great, no hatred, no craving, no delusion, and they practice on the four exalted dwelling with loving kindness, compassion, joy or happy, and equanimity. And he give you like the reason, even though if you don't believe in rebirth or karma. So he say there's four solace is like assurance. If you following that, then even though there is rebirth, if there is another world, like if you believe in rebirth and another realm exists, and you believe in karma, then what you practice, because you do the good thing, then based on that, it will lead you to better realm. If it exists, the karma exists, and the other realm and rebirth. So that's one assurance. The second assurance is if there's no realm, no karma, no rebirth, then at least what you do it right now, you will enjoy peace and well-being. So it's not necessarily have to wait for next life, but right now what you practice already get the benefit out of that. So that's his main point is so basically he tried to remove the doubt, because it doesn't matter where you believe or not. Important thing is the way you practice, and if you get the right view, then what you do and what you speak will correspond, and it have its own benefit. So that's pretty much summary of the sutra. So what do you think?
Well, tell me the name of the sutra again.
It's Kalama Sutta.
Kamala.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's another name. It's a but it's word commonly known Kamala,
Okay.
because it's referred to Kamala people. So any thought on that one? Yes.
Question. Go ahead, Marcus.
I'll go ahead and answer. Mine is pretty relevant.
Can you talk a little bit more about when we may experience karma? Is it as simple as in one life you live it the way you live it, and then in the very next rebirth that's when you experience the karma from
It's-
that? Or could it be you in 5 more times when you
It's
get
not
boring,
necessary.
You're experiencing karma from, I don't know how to say it the right way, but
It's
50 years ago or something.
it's
like that.
not necessary have to get the result right after the next life or in this life. So there is a concept in Buddhism is conditionality. What it say is thing happen. There's a main cause, right? And then there are supportive factors. So there's main factor and supportive factor. Those need to go together in order to lead to a consequence. So even though you get a main cause, so let's say you kill someone, there will be a consequence. But that consequence not going to be blossom right this life. Maybe there's some time, right? You get killed, you get caught. Then the consequence right this life. But sometime you don't. There's some murder that get unresolved, right? But if you believe in rebirth, then the consequence it will be in future. It's not necessarily in the next one, unless only conditions come together. Even though the main cause, the main factor is there, but if the condition is not there, then it's not going to blossom. So it may be next one, maybe 5 or 6 life in the future, but it's guaranteed eventually you will get. So that's why in Buddhism you have to be very careful on, and remember I mentioned about the karma. There is 3 sources for karma: is the mind, which is volition, and the action, and your speech. And in the first discussion we're talking about the mind is the leader of everything. So if you have impure mind, unwholesome mind, which will lead to unwholesome action, bodily action, and speech. So that's why the mind is very important, and in that we say that's why we meditate. What we do is we purify the mind. So is that?
Yes, thank you.
Any? Yes.
I have another question.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you, so you said you yourself, it took you a while to become a believer.
I'm sorry?
It took you a while, it took you some time for you to become a believer of, like you
So
believe
you
in the
asked
karma.
me whether I believe rebirth and karma
Yes,
right now?
Yes. And
Um,
if you do, how did it come about?
well, that's why I want to discuss next, because for me, and I believe, because during the process of training there are certain behavior or characteristic that you don't know how to explain, and let's just say for my case, I don't know about you, but like for example, for me, for some reason, when I young, I don't see tradition. People get married, people hang around, have girlfriend or boyfriend, and have family. And for me, at the beginning, and look at that, I see such as troublesome. Maybe because my sister and my brother, I look at all the problem they get into. But for me, for some reason, I don't have the, intention to get married. For some reason, you don't know why. How can you explain? I don't. But once I become a monk and during the practice, and you realize, maybe because before my previous life, I used to become a monk. And that's monk life habit. is solitude. I'm very introvert person. I'm very solitary. I refer quiet, and those nature very fit right into a monkhood. So I don't know whether I totally believe 100%. I would say I have to have direct knowledge, like the Buddha said, before I completely believe. But for me, I still believe there is rebirth. That means before I very attached to the concept of I have to experience. Must have direct knowledge before I can accept. Now I let it loose. Yeah, maybe you don't. But that's why the Buddha tried to tell you. If you read further, sutra is one of his psychic power is his ability to recall the past life and ability which is called the knowledge or the wisdom of past life. He can recall innumerable past life. And the second psychic powers, the wisdom is the ability to see, he called the divine eye, the ability to see the cause that lead to where you go, or what he called the karma. And then the last power he mentioned is the path that lead to liberation. So that's maybe the reason why the Buddha say you need to meditate and be able to get that. I mean, it's not the final object that you meditate, you training in order to get out psychic. But the very fact that you train and the psychic is a side effect, and having that, it will confirm your belief. But to me, it doesn't matter whether the rebirth there or not, whether any other realm beside the animal realm and the human realm, whether hell, heaven, ghost, you don't know, but keep open mind. So my approach is be open mind to what the information you get. For my understand based on this sutra is you should not, it's always open mind. You should not blind believe. Blind belief, that means you just follow, doesn't matter, without direct knowledge. But you should not like a totally non-believer. You reject everything. It's like too extreme. It's a midway is you should open mind. You neither immediately reject or accept, but took what the thing people tell you or what you learn as it is, and then start with contemplation. Think, see whether it makes sense, whether it's logical. So the Buddha doesn't reject the logic. It doesn't reject reasoning. It doesn't mean reasoning is bad. It's just still you have to deal with that reasoning, because who knows? You can reason based on your false assumption, false data, or your reasoning is incorrect. It still may lead to you wrong view. And once you contemplate or think, then the very last one, you have to apply or experience or practice, because to confirm it, because otherwise it's just poor reasoning. So that's the key thing. That's why in Buddhism they tell you the learning method. There's 3 steps. Listening. So listening either from hearing, from reading. That's the first step. And then the next step, you have to contemplate. You have to think about what you learn. Does it make sense? Does it sound logical? And then the last step is practice. And that's a key part. Because only through practice it will be validated of what you learn or what you're reasoning. And the more you practice, the more validation you get, and the more firmly you believe in that. It sounds logical, it sounds scientific to me in the way, right? In science, you have certain set of data and you hypothesize, you put up hypothesis to explain those set of data, what does it mean. The only time the hypothesis become a theorem is when you experience, when you validate. When it's validated, it's become a theorem. So I remember once I'm in Vietnam, in Trúc Lâm, there's a PhD student in physics. He stopped by and he questioned about universe and those birds and karma. So I just remind him, even the theory, it's just you haven't rejected the theory yet. Just you have to remember the theory is because you haven't found a data that go against that theory. Once you find some invalidation, that theory is no longer true. So you have to remember the theory is just a theory. It's not the absolute. And if you hold tightly on the theory is the absolute truth, then you will hurt yourself. So we take a very simple, like in physics right now, right? We talking about Newton law at the old time, 300 years ago. The law of Newton, like gravity, only explain a lot of phenomena. But then Einstein come in and he talked about general relativity, which is something that's certain phenomenon that gravity cannot by itself, like Newton law, cannot explain. So this doesn't mean that Newton law is formed. It's only formed for certain set. It's only work for certain set of condition. When you find out there are certain thing it doesn't support, then you have to modify to explain more. That's how science works. Yes.
Our culture puts a lot of emphasis on empiricism, on observation and studies of material phenomena. But religion is more of a rational based.
Irrational?
No, rational.
Okay.
Rational based philosophy. Because you can't really scientifically observe rebirth in in a laboratory. But you have to derive the argumentation from observation of other phenomena.
Well,
like cause and effect, what goes up must come down, those kind of things. Our society, British countries, don't emphasize rationalism, which I think hurts religion because people think, empirically, what's good for me is all that's good. And rationalism requires you to think of others, as a basis of morality.
For me, you have to remember this, and this I realize is sometimes what you don't experience, it doesn't mean you reject that concept or that notion. For example, we pick one example is, can you see a microorganism?
No.
Remember what you sense, what you perceive the world through your sense organs, right? Through your eyes, your ear, your nose, your tongue, your touch, your contact, your tactile, your touching, and of course the last one is the mind, is more like inner world. But like for outside world, that's the first 5 sense is those. And just look at your eyes. How good is your eyes? It's equipment compared to like a camera. It's very raw, right? It cannot even see the detail one. So if you don't see the microorganism, it doesn't mean that the microorganisms not exist. It's just because your sense does not able to see that. So doesn't mean you don't have direct knowledge. You reject that concept. Yes.
Oh, I was going to say, I had the same kind of thoughts that Sophia had as well too. And, you know, birth and rebirth. So just wanted to add to that you're talking about, everyone's talking about there. And, you know, the Buddha gave an example very well. Is like, you know, we're constantly, even our own body, we're constantly rebirth, dying and rebirth, because we have cells in our body. So our body itself is constantly, you know,
Dying and always taking on the
Yep.
breath at the same time.
so if you contemplate that, even our mind thoughts, you know, because they give examples, just like you said, you have to think about it when you start following, you know, listening to more Dharma talks, they explain, give examples. Rebirth, even your thoughts. So mental thoughts, you know, you have a thought today, tomorrow you sleep, you wake up, you have another thought of that same thing. So even our body is constantly rejuvenating itself, it's constantly dying and constantly rebirth. So as you dig deeper into those thoughts, you see a lot of stuff that the Buddha says makes sense, but we just have to understand, like you said, like microorganisms. We may not be able to see it, but they're there. And once it's proven, then you start seeing a lot of the teachings make a lot of sense, and you have less and less doubt as you keep digging deeper.
Yeah, because like at the time of the Buddha only mentioned microorganism. So for all the monks, one of the required tools is the water filter. So every monk must possess that. So that they go and drink, they have to filter the water. And Buddha says because there are living things in that. You drink without filter, like you consume those living things. So at that time, he had the power of being able to see it. We don't, but at that time, if we reject that, it's a nonsense thing. Until later, 200, 300 years, right? Very recently, that we be able to confirm that. So that's what I try to say. And even you direct knowledge, that means you witness, you see something. It doesn't mean that will confirm the theory. Let's just put example about karma. So people will say there's a lot of bad guy, right? Do bad thing, but they have such a wonderful life, right? All the material, it seems karma is not right. And why the other, like maybe you yourself do a lot of good thing, but you always suffer. So from that perspective, and most of people will reject that karma, it's not correct. Because, well, you direct experience and you direct observation. But the Buddha say because you assume only one life, and the correlation between the action and the consequence you make might not be correct. So only the one that I guess from the perspective is the enlightened one, where they no longer have greed, hatred, and delusion. That's where they be able to tell what actually related or cause consequence from one action to another. Because it's obvious, like we can see a lot of injustice happen going on, and you can reject the karma right away, the law of karma.
Well, the funny thing is that karma and reincarnation are taught in most religions. You know, Jesus said, that measure which you mete out shall be meted back unto you. That's karma. And he said, that we'll go to hell until every last farthing is repaid. Meaning that there's a duration to our suffering as punishment, which most Christians just ignore. Because they think you just go to hell and that's where you stay, you know. But that's not what Christ said. What he said is that you'll go there until you've repaid, you know, what you've stolen. And then you're free. Because I come from the Catholic
Right.
background, and in our theology, you know, it's basically the same thing as Buddhism, is that there's a negative side of purgation, and there's a positive side of purgation. So you purge the sins, and then you learn virtues. But it's a constant balance and rebirth and advancement. And you can go back if you're not careful.
Right.
You don't want to go back.
For me, just look at this way. You don't have to believe in rebirth. You can see the other realm right within your mind. Think about that. You might have a wholesome thought, right? A thought that help other people, generosity, those equivalent to heaven. You don't have to wait and see a heaven realm. But if you consider that, it's kind of heaven itself. It's the joy that you give, the happiness generate based on generosity. And then think about when you anger, hatred, then what happened to your body? And what happened to your mind? You know, all the heat, the stress, that's only equivalent to, if you consider as hell. Doesn't have to be a realm of hell you have to go there. It's right now, you already experience that. So in a way, you can see that. It's already in the mind already.
I was thinking of what you said about the people having a good life, but when you look deep, you already know that their life from the outside is not that great, because if they have so much material, that can also create a lot of suffering. So it's how we assume that they have a great life. And when I'm in self-pity, then I can assume that I have a poor life, even though I'm doing so much for me. But when I feel the greatness and the gratitude and being grateful, then all of a sudden I feel like I have more than the person who has the most material.
Right. So I think that's a mistake. Most people associate with happiness with the amount of wealth or material you possess. But the true happiness come from within. It's not related to material. Yes, the material does you give some
Comfort.
some comfortable life, but the true happiness is not generate from that. So otherwise, the rich person should be very happy.
When we think about past life, when you explain like that, because when I was starting meditating, I remember going to a hypnotism lady, and I told her I would like to know that, because I thought that's fascinating, and I'm like, you know, you don't have to do the impossible. So I was looking for meditation. If I could meditate one day, I would feel like, you know, how it was 300 or 400 years ago. That would be amazing, you know. But then that takes me to a searching of something which is almost dreaming, you know, like thinking, is this it? And then this is not it. You know, so it's just another form of delusion for me. What I could say is, when I couldn't explain how I would end up sitting in a Zen temple, you know, like I grew up, and as far as I know, my parents are Somalian and Arisian, so a lot of Muslim in our family, and nobody I have known has ever entered a temple except me now. So, and I'm like, I could never have arranged for me to enter a temple, and I don't know how that is possible. I cannot explain that part.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, it's simple because if you believe in rebirth, then maybe before that you have some time spent with meditation and go to temple. That is the cause that maybe now you get back to that.
When I speak to my family, say when I was a kid, I used to find comfort, like we used to have a cloth table, like something like that for a dining table. I'll go under there and I'll sit for hours. And I'm like, you mean I didn't have any toys? Was I just sitting under the table? Because again, you're just sitting under the table. I'm like, okay. You know, now he tells me that, so I put it all together and I'm like, this is interesting. You know, I wish I could meditate like that under the table, like what I did when I was a kid, but now it's much harder. My mind races so much that even to think about coming here today, I didn't want to because I'm so distracted that sitting here, I know that I'm coming to be more painful. Like to just come down and sit.
Right. Yes.
So does the Buddha talk about, let's say rebirth is true, then what is it that goes from one life to another? It's not the body, so what is it?
Well, the that concept is very hard. Even though the Buddha reject the concept of soul, which is a permanent essence thing that transmit to one life to another, which we call soul, like an essence permanent thing. And I think the way the Buddha tried to explain is I think it's really important. A key principle in Buddhism talking about dependent origination. Anybody heard about that? Interdependent arising. That's a key one, which basically tell you is pre-existing new merging arising phenomenon come from pre-existing phenomenon. So thing not happen by itself, but it's all the things come together in a way form a new phenomenon, and the implication of that is a very deep. That leads to non-self concept, non-essenceless concept. That's a key thing, and then their concept of impermanence. So if you look at the dependent origination, tell you in spatial dimension is different component, different things come together, form a new thing. And if you really contemplate on that, itself already tell what is a conditioned phenomenon. By itself is essenceless. There is non-self. If we have time, we can expound on that. And then if you look at the time dimension of dependent origination, is impermanent. So things come together, but it's changing. Thing is not stay the same, it's changing. But the Buddha make it more explicit. It change in terms of decaying, degradation, heading towards cessation. So it's not just poorly changed, but it changed. That's why all sentient being, whether animal or human, is you born, right? Birth lead to aging, disease, sickness, and eventually die. That's the process that all sentient beings have to go through, regardless. And that is the truth of suffering. If we cover the Four Noble Truths, that is the very truth of suffering, unavoidable. And then as we're talking about sentient being, non-sentient phenomenon like mountain, river, house, it's go through the same process but different name. You form it, it have some maintenance, but in terms of degradation, eventually it's cessation or non-exist. So it's the same thing. So all conditioned phenomenon under the same law, subject the same thing. So if impermanent in direction of decaying, that's a setback. So that's a two concept, and that will lead you to suffering. So if we have more, we will talking about Four Noble Truths. That is the first lecture or Dharma that Buddha teach for his 5 disciples. And he say, if you truly understand, have insight of Four Noble Truths, that will liberate you. And if you duly have deep understanding of interdependent origination, it will liberate you. You see Dharma. So, you're welcome. Any questions? Even though some point I want to cover, but I think we run out of time. So, well, if no more questions, then we might recite. May this marriage and we earn direct to other living beings that help them to liberate and see the way. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.
Thank you. Come on, Thay.
You're welcome.